great.
Oh my gosh, I was so enamored with the Gatherverse. And you are
Yes, what
a
a great event.
business partner, yes, or a startup partner with the creator of the Gatherverse?
Absolutely, yeah. So Christopher Lafayette is my co-founder and partner, mentor, friend,
Cool guy, charming soul,
colleague.
interesting person.
Oh yeah.
I'll try to get
Oh,
Christopher on as
definitely.
well, and see if you actually have different stories about the same
Yeah.
thing. Your name, I will let you say it because I would like it to
Hmm.
be said appropriately. The short version
Sure.
of it is,
Ippolito Imani Caradonna.
and the long version of it is,
It's Hipólito Imani Caradonna Herrera Rivas Calero Goza de la Madrid.
excellent. So Ippolito is what I will call you for our conversation here.
Sure,
And so you
sure.
presented at the conference in an arena that most people doesn't know even is trying to exist. Can you maybe start us up and tell us,
Exactly.
because you've got a couple dance parties going here. You've got the fact that you and Christopher have HoloPractice. Now, what is that?
Hmm. So HoloPractice is a think tank, sort of like Marymount, that gathers. It's an incubator for medical immersive experiences that can be brought to you by extended reality, VR, AR, and the mix of the two. And so we gather minds that are really focused on that intersectionality between the emerging technology and healthcare technology.
And your hat is healthcare technology.
My hat is My particular expertise is actually molecular biology, so biomedical research, a little bit upstream from what the doctors are using. So research like our historic group of COVID-19 vaccines and development that happens in
So
the
you are
laboratory.
a
Yeah.
regular a molecular biologist, not just play one on TV.
Yes, just a plain old ordinary molecular biologist.
And
Yeah.
then you guys also are launching or trying to get started a new product, which is Aug Lab. So can you share what Aug Lab is?
Exactly. Definitely. Really excited about Aug Lab is an AR software interface for laboratory production. That's the spiel of it, but it really is an AR tool that helps scientists traverse the complex topography of a lab. So there's a lot of moving parts that are happening when you're planning an experiment, when you're doing a laboratory process. Auglab is like an assistant that helps you with holographic images of things that you need to know in the lab, like how instruments are working, how your experiment is running, and all the different tools that you could use if you had an actual assistant, physical assistant right by you. So it's your virtual lab assistant.
Or your lab whisperer that is telling you with visual heads up display stuff what you
Right?
don't do that. You forgot about this that's running, that, here's the right measurements you should have
Exactly.
had
Yeah,
there. I actually need one of those all the time.
exactly.
I'm a I'm a recovering glass hole. I mean, I was a Google Glass person when they came out, and I so appreciated the little
Yeah.
visual nags that would come up and the audio nags. And
Hmm.
I guess this is
Hmm.
my other, or this and this are my nags otherwise to chat. So this is more of a visual and
Right.
audio experience that you guys are designing,
Exactly.
building, prototyping, partnering on.
Exactly. Yeah. So it would be so it, we leverage see-through technology. So using a head-mounted display that is hands-free, so less touch points, less possibilities of contamination in the lab, being able to talk bidirectionally to the program. The program's talking to you, like you said, giving you those signals and those cues. And it also is AI governed, so it's learning as you're using it. It's making itself smarter with each use by picking up and being reinforced by the activities that you're doing.
I have probably 25 different questions already about what it is, what you're using, etc. But I'm going to
Sure.
swing back to this. I want you to tell me
Okay, no problem.
how
Yeah.
in the world you got into molecular biology.
Oh, I love this. This is a love story. I fell in love with gene regulation, molecular biology in the redwoods, deep in the redwoods of UC Santa Cruz,
Hmm.
where banana slugs, go slugs, and
And this is where you were an
so I
undergraduate
actually
student.
this is where I was an undergraduate. My story goes back a little bit further, and I'll just give you the short of it, and then if we want to dive deeper, we could. But I
As a
started
film
out
school kid.
going to school for film. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, at Loyola Marymount. So I was thinking we definitely sync up. Especially with we're talking about postcard moments, right? In your little
Yeah.
tidbit and your snippet that you were, I've had a lot of postcard moments, Gigi. I've had a lot of nodes and pivots in my life where I listened to the call and I took that turn as a musician, as a filmmaker, as an artist. I dropped out of film school, started in social services, became a social worker for 6 years in Santa Clara County, where I grew up in Gilroy, California, a little further south, where the
Garlic
garlic
Festival.
capital of the world,
Absolutely.
right? And so after that, I thought to myself, I want to go back to school. All this vocational stuff was being pushed towards me, and like be a physician assistant, be all these trade schools. And I thought to myself, why not just go back to school and see what piques my interest? And so biology it was. I I heard about what we call junk DNA. So the DNA in our bodies and our cells that are not being used and how they're regulated,
Okay, I'm going to stop you there.
how genes are
What is
regulated.
junk DNA?
So junk DNA it's just a funny term for the DNA in our cells that's not being used. So some people talk about like we're only using 10% of our brain, or which I think if you talk to some neurologists, that's not true. But in fact, a lot of the DNA in our cells is not necessarily transcribed or used to make proteins. It's actually more structural. So we have eons and eons of this DNA that hasn't been used. And what piqued my interest was that if you were able to somehow upregulate or express that DNA, really cool things happened. So that was my that was my
That pulled you into the
what would you
banana
call it?
slugs. That pulled you into molecular
Ex-
biology at UC Santa Cruz.
yeah, exactly. It was the light bulb moment, and I loved it, and I couldn't get out of the lab ever since. So
Wow.
I've been doing research more than 10 years now since that
So
point.
when you explain what the lab's like, I must admit, I was a pre bio research on psychobiology first round through for undergrad before film school found me. And I started doing lab work and I was going,
Wonderful.
"Oh, I this is not my space. Sitting in a lab is not my zone."
Exactly.
So what is lab life like? Because
Hey,
in many ways you're augmenting lab life.
exactly. Yeah, and I've had plenty of experience that has really inspired me um, to create Aug Lab. So lab life is, I would say, it's paying attention. It's really, having to have a really, really fine attention to detail. That's, I think, one of the main characteristics and qualities of a good scientist is to pay attention and actually document your observations. And there's a lot of apprenticeship and mentorship and shadowing when you don't know a technique. So, being able to learn something and do an experiment or do a technique is different than being a master at it.
Mm.
And I learned early on, the more you fail, uh, you have to learn the hard way. So the more you fail at something, the more of a master you become at it, because you have to go back. You have to, assess all of the factors that were involved in the experiment. What did you do wrong? What was the actual biological question? So it's exciting to me, and I think if I could, one of my first mentors really hooked me when he said, he knew I was an artist, he knew I was creative, and he said, you actually can't do lab research without being open and creative. So you have to put that brain, you have to use two sides of your brain, Imani. And I was like, okay, you know what? Sign me up. I'm ready. And so, it does take a little bit of pushing through that, the formality, the procedures, all of the guidelines. But then when you get the technique, that's when you could start waving your wand and being creative, and asking those really interesting questions. So
Now I'm going to come back to the film school
is that
thing.
is that enough of that's my soap that's
It's a
my soap that's
great
my soapbox.
soapbox. So were you doing stereotypically creative work at the time? So were you doing film-ish things during this time period?
So during my time in the
Yeah.
lab, so I actually that's a great question. Not so much film, but I had gone to a performing arts school for high school, and theater was in my blood. And so at UC Santa Cruz, I was roped in again, inspired and hooked to join. It's called Rainbow Theater, and Rainbow Theater was a group of kids that put on, I think, five or six different productions a year. It was an African American production, an Asian American production, a Latino production, and then there was, something called the Poets Corner, where it was a mix of all bunch of different artists, poets, spoken word artists, dancers, rappers, singers, and so that was sort of me clinging, or not clinging, but maintaining my artistry. I had to stay in the realm so as to not lose my chops, and Rainbow Theater was a good place for that.
So how did immersive AR VR stuff walk into your life?
So that it was high tech, deep tech. Really always fascinated me. And when I went from UC Santa Cruz to work at UC San Francisco, I was introduced to the Center for Advanced Technology, the CAT, as we called it. And so that was where all of the gadgets and gizmos were, that's where they lived. And I got to get my hands on a automated liquid handler. And so it's a robot that is able to do the liquid transfers and perform the experiments that
So your
a human
jittery
would do.
hand wasn't necessarily an intermediary instead, right?
Exactly. So it's like, you know, so many benefits. Lack of carpal tunnel, it took a lot of the stress, um, and the load off of a lab user. So I thought, I was just like, this is amazing. And so I dove deep into the robotics of it. And that actually led me to my career in, Silicon Valley, in the industry. So I went from academia to industry with that passion to explore automated liquid handling. And that's what I'm doing now as a passion. And so having that, uh, deep, deep love for, technology, thinking about the future of work, that's what brought me to XR. And I knew about it because of gaming, really. That's all I really knew about it, was through the PlayStation. But when I had the inspiration for Aug Lab, I looked at my contacts on LinkedIn. And I do want I this is the story I do want Chris to tell, because I think it's a different story. I bugged this guy. I bugged him. I
Well,
was
how
like,
did you
"Look,
find him to
Chris,
bug
I
him?
have I don't that is the strangest. I We had mutual connections on LinkedIn. So we were already, connections. So what I was doing was I was looking through, I was like, who's like doing this stuff? Like who's actually building these products? Who's talking about AR and VR? And so Chris was there in my contacts, and I just pinged him. And this is where it might differ, but I must have, I think, over the span of a half a year, just pinging him, pinging him. And this man, as you know, is so busy, busy, and so I was persistent. I was like, I really have this great idea. I want to share it with you, and let me know if you're available. And so finally, near the end of 2019, he answered, and it was like they say, the rest is history.
Now,
So,
he geographically is where?
um, Mountain
So
View.
you guys are, thank
So right
goodness,
around the
heading into
corner.
the pandemic, somewhat adjacent geographically, though I'm assuming that even if he was halfway
Yeah,
around the world with everyone working remotely. But so how was it to essentially sort
exactly.
of come into the pandemic working through an innovation partnership?
It was great. It was at, well, the partnership itself was like many, really leaned on uh, telecommunication, the Zoom calls and the phone calls, or being able to sort of uh, share that moment. What was great about our product was that it was an answer to the pandemic, and so it was amazing for us to be able to build and to do the research and to do all the processing of the technical stuff through the web. And so we didn't really need to be face to face, and that was something that the product was offering as well. Where you can collaborate with scientists from all over the world, in the safety of your own lab.
So I'm gonna maybe nerd a little bit on product. So what are you using as a
Sure,
heads-up display for the development work?
that's a great question, and I think we've recently landed on the
Okay.
HoloLens, uh, because of its developer tools, and the all the work that's been put into the see-through display there. Um, but to be honest, I think that for the prototype and for the development, it's important to pick
Mm-hmm.
one, as opposed to, trying to do too much or bite off too much that we could chew. But we're very open, and we look forward to partners that have a strong opinion about it, right? Obviously, Chris has more know-how about this stuff, but for me, it's, can we capture the experience, and can we capture the experience conveniently, so that a big headset isn't, weighing you down in the lab, and so that you can actually be comfortable in the lab, as much as you can be. So that's what I'm looking for the future, when we do actually land on um, the HMD that we're going with.
It's very interesting to think about, and that comes back bringing your film and creative background, how to
Hmm.
storyboard a work experience, right? So you're needing to figure
Hmm.
out how to make something additive and not distracting. And
Exactly.
and that actually reminds me that I need to have somebody else on this show that I know that is a media psychologist looking at this for heads up display in automotive. Similar questions, right?
Wow.
In the how do I have something
Right.
that is going to be additive, engaging, not irritating as heck, and is going to be able to be a collaborative environment. How are you guys? How are you storyboarding this?
So we're going into the labs, and we're asking, mainly, because I think it's easy because we're making a product for me, my kind of people. My background as a scientist gives us at least one uh, use case scenario, but reaching out to all of our, the extensive network, trying to really sit down with the questions and the pinch points and the points of tension that come up in a lab, right? And tackling those first. So I think a really good example is when you say additive, it's not really even additive. It's like, I think the what I was trying I'm trying to look for the word, and I'm still even bouncing it around people, but it's sort of a focus. And it's not so much the holographic displays that are, bouncing at you, but it's how the real time image, your perspective and your view can actually be isolated and focused on what it needs to be focused on. So in a way, sort of subtracting out the distractions that are in real time, so that you can focus on what you need to focus on, right? And so, for example, when you go into a lab, you have a whole bunch of different, whole bunch of instruments. Aug Lab has what we call a discovery mode, where the the image of what you're seeing kind of goes bluish, where then particular aspects of the lab, like let's say instrument or reagents or different factors, different components of the lab are highlighted, right? And so it's sort of like, I guess the best way to describe it is like detective mode, in a video game. We want the user to be able to focus on what they need to focus on when they want to focus on it. So let's say, hey, is this instrument in use? Can you tell me the runtime? When will it be available? When was the last, maintenance call on it? Give me all the layers of information that you can, as opposed to all the information bouncing at you at once. So yeah, focusing as opposed to, trying to really hone in and help that attention to detail that's really, really needed in the lab.
Very cool. Are you guys working on anything else you can share from HoloPractice? How are you engaging with others with this? How are you sort of percolating new opportunities other than maybe not bugging people on LinkedIn? I mean, how are you then using that as a hub, a think tank to engage with people?
Absolutely, yeah. So what I had mentioned in the talk too at Gatherverse, I'm really excited to really announce it and get geared up for 2022 goals for HoloPractice. And my top three goals for HoloPractice is to first to organize an event, a roundtable where we can bring the medical community, key players in the medical community, and key players in the emerging technology field, and just have a conversation. What can we help you with? And like the question always comes up, why would we not equip our frontline medical workers with the best technology ever? What is that
Hmm.
technology? What do you need, medical community? And so I think it's going to be really exciting to build that event. Um, we're going to have that on the Gatherverse platform. We're really excited to bring those key players and have that roundtable discussion. That's
And
one.
Gatherverse is
We're
sitting on the
also
AWE
continuing.
platform, right? Which is sitting
Exactly.
on what,
Exactly.
Hublio or something like that. I've done way too many
Right,
virtual
right.
events this past 2 years, so definitely tend to tap people on the shoulder. Go, what tech is that? What are you on? How does that work?
I know, and it's just so convenient. And we're so grateful for the support from Ori Imbar, at AWE, that's,
Which is
opened his
Augmented
arms and,
World
and sort of
Expo, um,
Augmented World
which is a
Expo.
which is a fairly long time living. I haven't been to AWE in about 5 years, but I used to go, and it just got almost too crowded. It's so popular, and they're doing such a great engaging hybrid engagement right now during all of this, right when of course the metaverse is getting hyper popularized, where people suddenly think it's just been
Exactly.
invented or something like that. which I find amusing. So it's
Exactly.
me on the Gatherverse space, which really is a very
Mhm.
wonderful virtual events and community platform.
Right. Yeah. And so I think a lot of the people that were at Gatherverse already were inspired by the talk, and they approached me, and so we're already building that network, that community of people that want to talk about how can, how can this intersectionality be as fruitful as possible with the medicine, medical, and even the like for me, the biomedical research and emerging technology, XR, extended reality.
All good
It's
stuff.
exciting. So that's the first goal for HoloPractice, but we also want to continue our research with our three pillars of we call it three pillars of progress. It's perceptual alignment, um, time immersion, and human-centered technology transfer. Now, I have a talk on the 26th, which is like a 2-hour talk that I'm going to go into in depth about all of these things. But I my goal is to put together um, a white paper on this so that we can actually like spell it out for people that are curious about how we're building the platform and really the topics that we're talking about. How can we help the user be more,
Mm-hmm.
enhanced? How can we augment that experience as opposed to changing it or distracting it in any way? So those are really that's really important, and I would love to. So we're collaborating to put that paper out there, just to publish that, so people can sink their teeth into what we're doing at HoloPractice.
What have we not talked about that you're excited about you'd want to share with our audience?
Well, I think it was. Um, I think I was mentioning it a little bit before the show. You know, the I think the social impact that Aug Lab has, I'd love to talk a little bit more about that because when it comes to education, um, I know in terms of my experience coming from social work uh, into the science space, I sort of kept that hat on and trying to promote higher education in STEM. It's difficult to see oneself um, in that type of career path. And I think a lot of it has to do with sort of that intimidation. So people feel intimidated, the complexities of science. You're like, what is molecular biology? And it sort of becomes alien to people. And I'm just what I'm really excited about is sort of flattening that learning curve so that it's not so obtuse, so that people have that ability to go into a lab and feel confident when they do and not feel like they're, let's say, maybe being a nuisance or like, taking another person's time that has to train them longer. So we want to accelerate training and cut that time, threefold, so that it's a little bit smoother and it can promote um, young people in STEM. And so that's one thing that beyond all of the hacking, the nerding out, I really see the social impact of the product when it gets adopted. And so I'm excited about that.
Excellent. So, what do you need? What would you like to show up at your door? How would you like people to reach out to you?
So yeah, we have our LinkedIn and our websites. So those are all great avenues. Hollow Practice is sort of the gateway because even if you have a product of your own, it's just a great community to come and share and build and ideate on these things that like I said, the cross section between medicine and XR. And so holopractice.com, and we have theauglab.com. Our LinkedIn, both mine and Christopher Lafayette's, is there. Those are all great ways to
We'll
reach
put those
out.
all in the show
We want
notes.
people to be excited. Thank you. Yeah, we just want people excited about what's going on. We're at a turning point with our technologies. And as I really try to make sure it's stressed as our science grows, we really need to grow with it. When we ask the question, why are we doing this? Our hearts need to be open as our minds, and really asking the questions that matter and how we can make a difference with all of our knowledge and all of the resources. So let's bring them all together to do the best that we can.
Thank you very much for joining us, and I'm inspired and looking
Thank
forward
you.
to where your adventures go.